Grandma left a letter explaining exactly why she cut my sister out of her will. My sister says the letter is fake. The judge disagreed. The $15,000 in legal fees disagreed too. I need to tell this story from the beginning, because if I start in the middle, with my sister demanding $95,000 or half my house, it sounds like a simple money dispute between siblings. It isn't. It's a story about 12 years, a woman I loved more than I can properly explain, and the difference between saying you love someone and actually showing up for them. Those two things are not the same. My grandmother understood that. She wrote it down before she died. I'm 28. My sister is 33. Our grandmother passed away 14 months ago at 89, after a life that spanned continents, wars, and the kind of quiet endurance you only see in people who've survived things that would break most of us. She was small and stubborn and funny and sharp, right up until the last year when her body began failing faster than her mind. I loved her the way you love people who shaped you, not dutifully, not out of obligation, but because she was genuinely one of the most remarkable people I've ever known. She left me $45,000 in her will. She left my sister nothing. My sister now claims I stole from her, manipulated a dying old woman, and that my $389,000 home in suburban Columbus is half built on money that rightfully belongs to her. She wants $95,000, her claimed half of the down payment plus her share of equity growth, or she wants legal co-ownership of the house. This is that story. The background: 12 years of Sundays. My grandfather died when I was 14. Heart attack, sudden, the kind of death that doesn't give anyone time to prepare. My grandmother had been married to him for 51 years. She was 75 when he died, independent but aging, living in the same house they'd owned since my father was a child, a 2-story brick colonial 30 minutes from where I grew up. For the first year after grandfather died, the family rallied around her the way families do. My parents visited often. Aunts and uncles checked in. There was a community of concern. But life has a gravitational pull toward itself, and slowly, people returned to their routines. Kids needed driving to school. Work demanded its hours. The emergency of grandmother's grief faded into the background of ordinary life. My sister had already moved to Seattle by then. She was 21 when grandfather died, freshly graduated, following a job and a boyfriend into a new life. I don't fault her for that. Seattle is a real city, full of real opportunities, and she built something there. That part of her story is legitimate. What happened next is where our stories diverge. I got my driver's license at 16. The first thing I did, and I remember this clearly, the particular pride of having keys in my hand and somewhere purposeful to drive, was take myself to grandmother's house. Not because anyone told me to. Because I wanted to see her. Because she was my grandmother and she was alone, and I knew, at 16, that those things mattered. I kept going. Every week, then twice a week when her health started requiring more. I mowed her lawn through high school. I learned to fix things: leaky faucets, squeaky door hinges, the ancient furnace in her basement that needed specific coaxing to fire up every October. I drove her to church when she couldn't drive anymore, sat in the pew next to her, held the hymnal because her hands shook. I drove her to doctors, the cardiologist, the orthopedist, the eye doctor, appointments that multiplied as she got older and her body added more items to its list of complaints. But more than the practical help, and this is the part one want to be precise about, I just sat with her. Sunday afternoons became our ritual. She'd make tea she couldn't quite taste anymore, and I'd fix the things she'd saved up through the week, small repairs, and then we'd sit in her living room and she'd tell me stories. About the old country. About grandfather when he was young and had hair and thought he was funnier than he was. About a version of the world that existed before I did, that I could only access through her. I memorized those stories. I still have them. My sister called every 6 weeks on average. 10 minutes, maybe 15. So busy, Grandma, work is just crazy right now. Birthday cards. Christmas cards. Maybe twice a year in person. Holiday visits, quick ones, always with somewhere else to be on day 3. I know the call frequency because I managed grandmother's phone account in her last 3 years, when tech became too complicated for her and she needed someone to handle the billing and settings. I saw the logs. I'm not making up the 6-week averages or the 10-minute durations. That's not an accusation, it's a record. Grandmother noticed. She never complained directly to me about my sister. That wasn't her way. But I heard it in how she talked about her. Your sister is so busy with her important career. I understand, she has her own life. Maybe next Christmas she'll manage to stay longer. She made excuses for my sister's absence with the practiced generosity of someone who'd learned that you can't force people to show up, so you might as well cover for them. But she noticed. She was sharp. She was observant. And 5 years before she died, she updated her will. The will, the letter, the inheritance. Grandmother's estate was not large. The house sold for $180,000 after her death. Proceeds went to charity, her specific instruction, because she believed the house should do something good in the world after she left it. Personal items were divided among family. Her savings, $45,000, went to me. The will was clear, witnessed, properly executed with a lawyer present. Grandmother had written a letter to be attached to the will, explaining her decision. I didn't know about the letter until the estate lawyer read it aloud. To my grandson, who never missed a Sunday, who fixed my home, who held my hand when I was scared. You showed me what family means. This is my thank you. To my granddaughter, I love you, but love requires presence. I hope you understand. I cried when I heard it. Not because of the money, I hadn't expected anything, but because she'd seen me. 12 years of showing up and she'd seen every one of them, catalogued them, understood them for what they were. The $45,000 wasn't a windfall. It was a receipt. Evidence that presence had been witnessed and valued by the person who mattered most. My sister's face went still when the lawyer finished reading. There must be a mistake, she said. She loved us equally. She always said so. There was no mistake. There was no mistake at all. Update 1. The phone call, 3 months after the funeral. I'd closed on my house by the time my sister made her move. The $45,000 went toward the down payment on a 4-bedroom in a good suburb of Columbus. $389,000, more house than I'd initially planned, but grandmother's gift made the mortgage workable. I thought of her when I walked through the door for the first time as owner. Her money was in these walls, her faith in me, her thank you for 12 years of Sunday afternoons. That felt right. It felt like honoring her. Then my sister called. The accusation came within the first 2 minutes. No warm-up, no checking in. Straight to, I've been thinking about grandmother's will, and it doesn't make sense. She loved us equally, she always said so. The only explanation I can come up with is that you manipulated her. You were there all the time, probably saying things about me, making yourself look indispensable, taking advantage of an old woman who was isolated and lonely. That money should have been split evenly, $22,500 each. But you got all of it and put it toward a house. Your $389,000 house is built on MY inheritance. I want $95,000, my half of the down payment plus my share of the equity growth. Or I want half ownership of the house. I sat with that for a moment. Not because I was uncertain, I knew exactly what grandmother's wishes were and why, but because I was genuinely trying to understand the architecture of what my sister believed. She wasn't performing outrage. She was actually outraged. She actually believed this. I didn't manipulate her, I said. I visited her. I helped her. That's not manipulation, that's being a grandson. You were there constantly, she said, as if frequency of presence was itself suspicious. You monopolized her time, made yourself the center of everything, made her dependent on you. If I'd lived closer, I would have visited just as much. The only difference was geography. Geography wasn't the difference, I said. You had vacation time. I know because you went to Europe 2 summers ago and Hawaii the summer before that. You had money for flights. Seattle to Columbus is not an expensive route. Other people maintain relationships across 2,500 miles. Phone calls, video chats, visits when they can manage it. You called grandmother every 6 weeks for 10 minutes. I called her 3 times a week. I have the records. That's not geography. That's priority. Silence. I was busy, she finally said. You don't understand what it's like to have a demanding career, real responsibilities, a life with actual stakes. Your life was simpler. You had time because nothing else required your attention. I noticed the insult threaded through the excuse. My life was simpler, less important, less demanding. As if 12 years of showing up for grandmother were something I did because I had nothing better to do, rather than something I chose because I understood that showing up for the people you love is what love actually means. She wrote a letter, I said. Attached to the will. The lawyer read it. She explained exactly why she made her choice. That letter isn't real, my sister said, without hesitation. Grandmother would never say something like that to me. You wrote it, or the lawyer did. She would never punish me for having a life. I didn't have an immediate response to that. It takes a moment to absorb the claim that a document you heard read aloud by an estate lawyer, written in your grandmother's recognizable voice, in her cadence, with her particular way of turning a phrase, that this document is a forgery you engineered. She was mentally competent until the end, I said. Documented. Her doctors can confirm it. She updated her will with a lawyer present, executed it properly, wrote the letter in her own hand. If you want to claim incompetence, you'll have to contend with a woman who managed her own finances, remembered every family birthday without prompting, and accurately predicted 3 elections. She wasn't manipulated. She was paying attention. There's a difference. My sister hung up. But not before saying, "I'll get lawyers. I'll contest the will. I'll prove what you did." Update 2. The meeting, a month later. My sister flew in. She wanted to meet in person, which I agreed to. We sat across from each other in a coffee shop not far from grandmother's old neighborhood, her territory in a sense, the landscape of my 12 years of visits. She brought a prepared narrative. I could feel its structure as she spoke. She'd been constructing it for weeks, probably rehearsing it, testing it against sympathetic listeners who'd told her it sounded reasonable. "Grandmother loved both of us," she started. "She said so constantly. I love both my grandchildren equally. You know she said that." "She did say that," I agreed. "She also said love requires presence, in writing, attached to a legal document. Both things can be true. She loved you. She also noticed that you weren't there. Love as a feeling and love as a practice are different things. She was making a statement about practice." "You're twisting her words." "They're her words. I'm repeating them." She shifted tactics. Even if she felt that way, even if she was hurt by my distance, that doesn't mean she would have intentionally excluded me from her estate. That's not who she was. She was generous. She was fair. She believed in family. She was also honest, I said. She spent years watching who showed up and who didn't. She saw your visits, the holiday obligations, the quick turnarounds, always somewhere else to be by day 3. She heard the 10-minute phone calls that ended with, "I really have to go." She felt what she felt. And then she made a legal document that reflected what she'd observed over a decade. That's not cruelty. That's honesty. My sister's jaw tightened. "I'm your sister. Family shares. Grandmother would have wanted us to be close, not fighting over money. If you actually loved her, you'd know she'd want peace in the family. Give me what I'm owed and we can move on." I recognized what was happening. She was using grandmother as an instrument, invoking what grandmother would have wanted to override what grandmother had actually documented she wanted. It was the most sophisticated manipulation in the conversation, claiming the moral authority of the deceased to contradict the deceased's clear wishes. "Grandmother told us what she wanted," I said. "In writing. With a lawyer present. She didn't leave it to interpretation. She was specific. You're asking me to override her clear, documented wishes in order to make you feel better about choices you made. I don't think that's honoring her. I think that's the opposite of honoring her. So you're choosing a dead woman's instructions over your living sister." "I'm choosing her instructions over your preferred version of her instructions, yes." She stood up before I finished the sentence. "Then we're done. You're not my brother anymore. You're just the person who took what was mine. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Tell them I visited her every week for 12 years, I said. Tell them she wrote a letter. Tell them the will is a public document. Then tell them what you want me to give you and why. See how that story lands." She left. I sat with my coffee for a while, watching the street grandmother used to walk when she was steady enough, before the cane, before the walker, before I was driving her everywhere. I thought about all the Sundays in that neighborhood, all the times I'd parked on her street and walked up her front path, the specific creak of her front door, which I'd oiled exactly twice and which always managed to develop a new complaint within 6 months. I thought, she made the right call. Grandmother made the right call. Update 3, the legal challenge, and what the judge found. My sister filed to contest the will. I'd consulted a lawyer before the meeting, so I wasn't surprised when the paperwork arrived, but I was struck by the specific argument her attorneys put forward. The claim was undue influence, that I had exploited a position of trust and proximity to manipulate an elderly, isolated woman into excluding a rightful heir. My lawyer reviewed the filing and was direct with me, "She's going to lose. But it'll take 8 to 12 months and cost her somewhere between $15,000 and $50,000. Are you prepared for a prolonged process?" I was. The alternative, paying $95,000 to avoid the process, would have meant dishonoring grandmother's explicit wishes in order to reward exactly the behavior grandmother had specifically chosen not to reward. That wasn't something I could do. The case took 9 months. The documentation in grandmother's favor was, frankly, overwhelming. Her medical records showed consistent cognitive clarity through her final year. Her doctors had performed periodic assessments, and she'd scored well on all of them. Her lawyer submitted an affidavit describing a client who had come in fully prepared, explained her reasoning with specificity, and executed her will with complete awareness of its contents and implications. Multiple witnesses from her church, her neighborhood, her doctor's offices submitted statements describing a woman who was engaged, lucid, and very much her own person. My sister's attorneys argued that my presence in grandmother's life constituted undue influence, that the quantity of time I spent with her was itself evidence of manipulation. The logic, as I understood it, was, if you spend enough time with an elderly person, any decision they make in your favor becomes suspect. The judge didn't find that persuasive. The ruling came on a Tuesday morning. I read it in my kitchen, the kitchen I'd renovated last summer, partly with the inheritance in mind, because grandmother had always complained that good kitchens were the mark of a home worth living in. The judge's language was precise, clear testamentary intent, documented cognitive competency, written explanation of reasoning by the testator herself, no evidence of isolation or coercion, no evidence of improper conduct. My sister's argument, reduced to its essence, was that she deserved equal inheritance despite unequal presence, because grandmother had loved them equally as a matter of stated sentiment. The court found no legal basis for overriding documented testamentary intent on those grounds. The case was dismissed. My sister had spent $15,000 to lose an argument grandmother had already answered in a letter 9 months earlier. Love requires presence. She hasn't spoken to me since the ruling. I've heard through my parents, who maintain careful relationships with both of us, that she believes the legal system failed her and that I somehow engineered the outcome. My father told her, gently, that the outcome was engineered by grandmother, 5 years before her death, with a lawyer and 2 witnesses present. My sister apparently didn't receive that well. Update 4. The family fracture, and the people who already knew. My sister made good on her promise to tell people. She built her version of events, the devoted daughter kept away by geography and career demands, the calculating brother who'd spent 12 years positioning himself for inheritance, the vulnerable grandmother who'd been gradually isolated from her real family. She told aunts. She told cousins. She told family friends who'd known grandmother for decades. What she hadn't accounted for was that the people who'd known grandmother for decades had also, in many cases, known me for decades. They'd seen me at her house. They'd seen me at church with her. They'd been at the doctor's offices, the holiday gatherings, the ordinary Tuesday afternoons that don't make for dramatic stories but constitute the actual texture of a relationship. My parents were unambiguous in their support, which mattered more than I'd anticipated. They'd watched 12 years of my relationship with grandmother. My mother told me, "We knew she'd leave you something. We didn't know how much. But we knew, we could see it in how she talked about you." My father, who tends to understate, said, "Your sister is angry about something that isn't really about money." He's probably right. The money is the symbol. The real thing underneath it is that she knows, some part of her knows, that she chose other things over grandmother, consistently, for 12 years, and that grandmother noticed, and that there are consequences to that kind of choice. Some family members sympathized with my sister. She lived so far away, it was hard. Career demands are real. Geography makes everything more difficult. These are true things. They're also insufficient explanations, and the people who said them were, I noticed, mostly people who hadn't been particularly close to grandmother themselves. The people who had, who'd sat in her living room, who'd known the rhythm of her days, who'd watched her age, they told a different story. Her neighbor of 30 years told me, "Your grandmother talked about you every week. My grandson was here, fixed the furnace. My grandson drove me to the eye doctor. She never talked about your sister except to say she was so busy." That's not geography. That's just what your grandmother knew. The family has divided in the way families divide over things like this, not dramatically, not completely, but into distinct camps that will probably never fully reconcile. Holiday gatherings now require management. My parents navigate carefully. I've made peace with the division because the alternative, pretending the dispute didn't happen, pretending my sister's claim was legitimate, pretending grandmother's wishes should have been overridden to preserve family comfort, would have required a level of dishonesty I'm not capable of. Grandmother was honest. She wrote it down. I'm going to honor that, even if it costs me. Update 5. 2 years on, the house, the photo, the reckoning. It's been 2 years since grandmother died. My sister and I haven't spoken in 14 months, since a brief, disastrous text exchange following the legal ruling, which ended with her telling me she hoped I was proud of myself and me telling her I was, actually, because I'd honored grandmother's wishes and taken care of the home she'd helped me build. The house is exactly what I hoped it would be. The kitchen is finished, open to the living room now, the way grandmother always said kitchens should be, so you're not cooking alone while everyone else is having fun. The garden is coming in, tomatoes, beans, the zucchini that grandmother grew every summer in her backyard and that I always pretended to be more enthusiastic about than I was. I'm growing zucchini now. I understand her enthusiasm better than I used to. Her photo is on the mantel in the living room. It's the same photo that sat on her mantel for the last 15 years of her life, a picture from a family vacation in the mid-1980s, before my parents were married, when she was in her early 60s and hadn't yet become someone's grandmother. She's laughing in the photo. I don't know what she was laughing at. I wish I'd thought to ask. I talk to the photo sometimes. It's a thing I'd have been embarrassed about at 26 and am comfortable with at 28. The garden's coming in, I told her last week. The zucchini is going to be a problem, I can already see it. I told her about my sister, about the court case, about the family fracture. She still thinks I took something from her, I said. She might always think that. I can't fix that for her. What I've come to understand, in the 2 years since grandmother died, is that my sister's anger isn't really about me. It can't be, I didn't do anything wrong, and on some level she knows that. What the anger is really about is the decade she can't go back and change. The Sunday afternoons she wasn't there for. The phone calls she didn't make. The visits she kept postponing until things calmed down, until calm never arrived because calm wasn't really the obstacle. She had time. She had money. She had every resource she needed to maintain the relationship. She made other choices, consistently, over 12 years, and those choices are irrevocable now. Grandmother is gone. There are no more Sunday afternoons to show up for. The relationship my sister didn't build cannot now be built. The inheritance my sister didn't earn cannot now be earned. The letter grandmother wrote, "Love requires presence," cannot be unwritten. These things are fixed. You can contest a will, but you cannot contest the past. My sister spent $15,000 discovering that. The reflection, what I know now. She visited grandmother maybe twice a year. I visited twice a week. But now she claims grandmother loved us equally, and would have given us equal inheritance. Love isn't just a feeling, it's showing up. I showed up for 12 years. She showed up for 15 visits total. Those aren't equal. They're not equal. They were never equal. Grandmother knew they weren't equal. She said so, in writing, before she died. The legal system confirmed what the record already showed. My sister can reject all of this, the will, the letter, the court ruling, the testimony of people who knew grandmother, but she cannot make the unequal thing equal by claiming it should be. Claiming doesn't work like that. Reality is not a negotiation. She says I manipulated grandmother. My manipulation, fixing her leaky faucets, driving her to doctors, sitting with her on lonely Sundays. Hers, calling every 6 weeks for 10 minutes, visiting on holidays when convenient. Grandmother saw both. Grandmother chose accordingly. The manipulation narrative requires believing that consistent, loving presence is inherently suspicious when it results in inheritance. It requires believing that absence is neutral, that choosing not to show up carries no weight, no consequence, no meaning. It requires believing that grandmother was incapable of distinguishing between a grandchild who called every 6 weeks and a grandchild who called 3 times a week and drove her to every doctor's appointment for 5 years. My grandmother was not that person. She was sharper than that. She was more honest than that. Geography was her excuse. She lived 2,500 miles away. But she flew to Europe. She took Hawaiian vacations. She had money and time for what she valued. Grandmother wasn't in that category. That's not geography. That's priority. This is the part one come back to most often when I think about my sister's claim. The geography defense would have more weight if my sister had been genuinely resource-constrained, if the flights were actually unaffordable, if the time off was actually unavailable. But she took international trips. She took multi-week vacations. She had disposable income and discretionary time. She directed those resources toward things that weren't grandmother. That's a choice. Choices reveal priorities. Grandmother's will revealed what she'd observed. Grandmother wrote a letter, "Love requires presence. I hope you understand." She said exactly why she made her choice. Sister claims the letter is fake, that grandmother would never punish her. But stating consequences isn't punishment. It's honesty. This is what makes the letter so powerful to me, its precision and its lack of cruelty. Grandmother didn't write, "To my granddaughter who abandoned me." She didn't write, "To the child who couldn't be bothered." She wrote, "Love requires presence. I hope you understand." That's a statement of principle, not a condemnation. She left the door open for understanding. She hoped my sister would get there. I don't know if she ever will. Sister's real grievance isn't with me, It's with herself. She knows she wasn't there. She knows she chose career and convenience over grandmother. It's easier to blame me for stealing inheritance than to face that she didn't earn it. I believe this completely. I've believed it since the first phone call, when I heard the shape of her anger, how it came too fast, too hot, how it needed a target external to herself. People who are genuinely wronged are usually angry at the specific wrong. People who are defending themselves from their own guilt are angry at everything, at anything, at whoever's closest. My sister needed me to be the villain because the alternative was looking at 12 years of choices in the mirror. I understand the impulse, even if I can't accommodate it. She spent $15,000 contesting a will she was never going to overturn. The judge dismissed her case. No undue influence, clear testamentary intent, written explanation. You can't sue your way into an inheritance you didn't build a relationship for. $15,000. That's a third of what she was trying to take from me, spent on lawyers, spent on discovery, spent on a case that everyone in a position to assess it, her lawyers, my lawyers, eventually the court, understood was unlikely to succeed. That $15,000 represents something beyond the money, the depth of her conviction that she was owed something. You don't spend that kind of money unless you've truly convinced yourself the grievance is real. She had. She did. And she lost anyway, because grievance and entitlement, no matter how sincerely felt, don't override a legally executed will supported by medical documentation, witness testimony, and a handwritten letter from the deceased. The house cost me one relationship, with a sister who only valued me when she thought I had something she deserved. Grandmother's gift helped me build a home. Sister's absence helped me understand who she really was. Both were expensive lessons. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with my sister again. I don't know if she'll ever get to the place where she can look clearly at the 12 years before grandmother's death and see what was actually there. Maybe she will. Maybe enough time and distance will make it possible for her to stop constructing the version of events where I'm the villain and start seeing the version where she made choices with consequences and grandmother was honest about what she observed. Maybe that version is too painful. Maybe she never gets there. I've stopped waiting for her to get there. I have a house to take care of. The resolution, what grandmother knew. On the Sunday 2 weeks after grandmother died, I went to her house out of habit. It was empty by then, the estate process had begun, personal items being sorted, the house preparing for its eventual sale. I let myself in with a key I'd had for years and walked through the rooms that I'd walked through every week for 12 years. The furnace I'd coaxed through 8 winters. The faucets I'd replaced, the door hinges I'd oiled, the back steps I'd repaired when the wood went soft. My work was everywhere in that house. My presence was in the walls of it. I stood in her living room for a while, looking at the space where her furniture had been. The indentations in the carpet from chair legs. The slightly brighter rectangle on the wallpaper where a picture had protected it from light for 30 years. The window she used to sit by to watch the street when her knees made walking difficult. I stayed until I'd memorized what was left of her in that room. Then I left, drove to my new house, her down payment already processed, my mortgage already started, and I sat in my empty living room on the floor. "I've got it," I told the air. "I'll take care of it." Her photo is on my mantel now. The same photo that was on hers. I see it every morning when I come downstairs. I see it every evening when I turn off the lights. She's laughing in the photo, at something I'll never know, in a moment I'll never recover. But she's there. She's present. The way she taught me to be. My sister wants $95,000 because grandmother left me money and not her. She says I manipulated a dying old woman. But my manipulation was visiting her every week for 12 years, fixing her house, driving her to appointments, sitting with her when she was lonely. Sister's contribution was 15 visits in 12 years, 10-minute phone calls every 6 weeks, and excuses about being too busy. Grandmother noticed. Grandmother wrote a letter explaining her choice. Love requires presence. Sister wasn't present. I was. The $45,000 wasn't theft. It was thank you. Sister contested the will and lost. The judge saw what grandmother saw, one grandchild who showed up, one who didn't. You can't inherit what you don't invest in. You can't claim love while being absent. You can't demand money for relationships you never built. Grandmother understood this. She wrote it down. She made it legal. And now I live in a house partly built on her gift, her final thank you for 12 years of presence. My sister has nothing from grandmother except the knowledge that absence has consequences. That's not my fault. That's not manipulation. That's just what happens when you choose not to show up for the people who love you. They stop leaving you things when they go. The house stays. The memory stays honored. Grandmother's wishes, documented and legal, stand exactly as she intended them to stand. And somewhere, a woman stews over an inheritance she feels entitled to for a relationship she never built. That's her burden to carry. I have a garden to tend.